Good afternoon and welcome back. This is US Home Talk. We're live every Wednesday at noon and on demand at ushometalk.com or wherever you guys find your podcasts. We are your hosts, Marcus Walgrave with the South Dakota Home Team powered by Hague Realtors, Jason Walgrave with Walgrave Real Estate Group at RE/MAX Advantage Plus, and Mike Overson with Luminate Bank. We'll be taking all you guys' questions during today's show, anything and everything real estate. Our call-in number is 612-234-7585. Again, that's 612-234-7585. Or you guys can leave us a message in the comments section on Facebook. Good afternoon. How are we doing today, guys?
I'm doing pretty good. We lost Jason somewhere.
We did lose Jason.
He was here.
We had him a minute ago. So,
oh man.
He was working on some technology pieces before the show started. So maybe he had an issue.
I mean,
he's got issues.
He's got issues. First of all, that's number one. And then he's also on a computer that I'm pretty sure he bought from Radio Shack, probably 14 years ago. So I think that could potentially, be an issue as well here. He's going to have to invest into something, I think.
Yeah, I just recently, my office informed me that my Windows 10 just wasn't good enough. And I had to get out Windows 11. So I found out that I couldn't upgrade to Windows 11 because of the computer that I had, 2 terabytes, virtually no memory being used or storage being used, but it wasn't compatible for 11. So unfortunately, or I should say fortunately, I had a second computer that was a couple years newer and I was just able to swap them out, but it's stressful, kind of a pain in the butt. It wasn't that bad. The tech people were awesome. But just the whole, the thought of having to do it was annoying and it was stressful. So,
well, it still probably takes a couple hours, right? I mean, it doesn't happen within a few seconds, I can't imagine. So it still eats up a good afternoon for you there.
Yeah. And that's what it was. It was, the gentleman got me in, it wasn't on schedule. And he's like, I got about an hour. He's like, we can kind of get it going. So we spent about an hour jumping back and forth from one to the other to transfer all the files. And then once that part was done, he's like, okay, now I need to work on it a couple hours on my end. I was like, 3:00, you got to work on it. I'm done. So I guess that was a plus as I snuck out of work afterwards. So
nice.
Good computer. I couldn't work anymore. So
right.
Anywho, Mike Overson, Luminate Bank, Evan Little, awesome, amazing producer, insurance guru. He's in the background, making sure that the show rocks. Jason might be coming. I think he's coming. He may be coming. Maybe not. We'll see. Time will tell. But we're gonna go ahead and jump right into today's show. Today's topic was kind of prepared as a question, right? The future of real estate is small. Now, when I first kind of thought of that, I was like, okay, the big future for real estate, but the concept of this, and this isn't a lot of new news to a lot of people who are listening in to pay attention to the real estate industry, but we're going to be talking about some tiny homes and tiny home developments, and that's going to be kind of the focus of today's show. And then I came across a really interesting article on Market Watch. Written by Joseph Coughlin, and so we're just going to kind of touch base on a couple points that he made, and maybe fill in some of the blanks that we or our own opinions. Since being a full-time realtor myself, Overson, you're one of the top mortgage bankers, servicing home loan products in the Twin Cities area. So we got some experience, we got some knowledge. If Jason ever shows up, maybe he can add some to it, or
a little, maybe a little.
Maybe a little. So, yeah, right. So, I just want to kind of jump into and kind of put some of the foundation of what our topic is today, and tiny homes, right? nothing new. We've been seeing about tiny homes. We've been hearing about tiny homes. Hey, he's here. He made it back. He made it back. Jason Walgrave with the Walgrave Real Estate Group at a Remax Advantage Plus. Welcome back to the show.
Well, I don't know what I did, but so it's a coin flip when I start pushing buttons, and I had a negative result in that button pushing, and now,
A negative
I'm
result.
on, but the screen does not look like it did 5 minutes ago. So, but it's good enough. So here we go.
So, Jason, when you typically push buttons, it's a good outcome.
Actually, it's not. No,
No?
Usually it's not a good outcome.
All right, well, intro's done. You're gonna have to slide in if you miss anything, but we're talking about tiny homes and just that concept. I mean, I might even throw it out there that perhaps it's a trend. So we're going to try to cover that here today. If you guys jump on Amazon, I went ahead and did a little Amazon search before today's show. Amazon is selling tiny homes. I mean, I didn't do an extremely deep dive. I kind of looked at the first, 50, 60, what would it be, Amazon listings? Is that a fair term to use? But with that being said, they're selling, you can buy a tiny home from Amazon ranging from $5,000 all the way up to $40,000. Now, some of these tiny homes are, maybe a glorified storage shed type of structure, but accommodates, power and some sort of plumbing and water, sewer, etc. And then the $40,000 ones, I tell you what, man, like if I had a chunk of land up in the northern part of Minnesota, I would be tempted to maybe throw one of those $40,000 ones out there. They're cool, I mean, they're neat. I mean, they don't have a lot of square footage, obviously, tiny home. But for 40 grand, and Amazon will ship it out there. And I've seen a couple YouTube shows where they construct them fairly quick. I mean, some are kind of container, they just come and they're just, you just kind of pull it, expand it in certain spots, and boom, you got a bedroom or maybe 2 bedrooms and a little condo style living quarters. So I think they're neat. I mean, you guys have seen the tiny homes, obviously, on Amazon or wherever.
Yeah, I think that interestingly, I've been working with clients of mine, and they're going to be putting a number of small cabin style, tiny homes on property that they own, right? And so we've gone through the whole process, and so there's an Amish group in southern Minnesota that builds these small tiny home, tiny cabin properties. And so here's the one thing that I've learned through this process is that, because I think these were, they were right around 700 square feet. So they, probably double the size of what you would think of a tiny home as, but nevertheless. And so, they were, their price tag on them was about, $90,000, $90,000. So I'm thinking, well, that's, and it's a log home. It's a small little log home. Like this is great. But as we did further research on it and this is kind of a disclaimer to, whoever's listening to the show, we had to look at, okay, is plumbing included? Is the, how is electrical included? What's the insulation? Where's it going to go? So you've got your land costs, you've got your, you've got to bring in your utilities, gas, electric, or maybe it's all electric, whatever the case is. Is it going to sit on a basement or is it a foundation? And so, going through this whole exercise, the actual cost, when we're all said and done, not including land cost, was probably closer to that 160. And so, that would be one thing to consider, that, and then the region that you're in, a structure in the southern states will be different than a structure that you're going to need in Minnesota. You got your extreme winters, extreme summers, right? And so, so just throwing that out there. But overall, the idea of tiny homes, I mean, Marcus, are they 300 square feet or 350 square feet, or what are you seeing in a lot of these?
Yeah, I mean the ones for $5,000, right? I mean it's always kind of like price per square foot,
Yeah,
you know, and
yeah.
and they're all ballpark, but you know the one level, you know, they are running. They're small. I mean 4 or 5, 600 square feet. When you start getting like these $40,000 Amazon ones, you know, you might have like 700, 800 square feet, and there's even like 2 levels.
Yeah.
You know, it's like 2 level, lots of windows, and but you know, to your point exactly, Jason. You know, when you start talking about these, for the most part, you know, when you're looking at the Amazon ones, I mean, I think it's fair to assume that that's what you're buying. You're buying the structure, and or any kind of like prefabricated home. You know, it doesn't come with the foundation. You're going to have to bring in a foundation. You know, that costs money. You're gonna have to bring in the plumbing. You know, maybe the structure has some basic plumbing, but you know, to bring it to the site or to bring power to the site, are you planning on using a generator or do you want it to be hooked up direct? You know, so those are definitely little things to figure out. But you know, the $40,000 ones on Amazon, I mean, they look cool. I mean,
Yeah.
I think if you were up in the woods and you know they got a lot of windows. To your point, you know, maybe not that. Oh, I guess it would be cool, literally in February up in Minnesota, and you got lots of windows. But then that's kind of the other point of today's topic is, you know, I did a little research, and you know, there's a growing number of states that are allowing these. You know, before they just simply didn't allow them. You know, they had minimums or you know, city requirements or ordinances or whatever. Jason, when you used your example, I would be interested to, you know, because depending on the county here in South Dakota, it's like a building eligibility is what we reference it as. A building eligibility. Some counties are like, you got 40 acres, you get a building eligibility. You got 80 acres, you got 2. You know, in increments of 40. Other counties that are maybe more growing, you know, that's not necessarily the case. You know, they may have been more of like, you know, the original farmstead gets 1, and then if a child wants to build on that farmstead, they're automatically allowed to have another. They don't need to get another homestead or a building certificate. They can already do it because a child's going to be living there. So it gets super interesting in the Sioux Falls area, you know, where maybe there's a lot of land or you can get your hands on 40 or 30 acres, but there isn't a building eligibility. There may not be a chance you can get one. So then you simply cannot build a house or put a house on those 30 acres. Yeah, and so it's kind of interesting how each county looks at that concept of like, hey, if this is a house, well, you need to have a building eligibility granted for that chunk of land.
Yeah, you're right, Mark. Because it depends on the county, and then it depends on the city as well. So, city of Minneapolis, for example, a number of years ago, they started to allow second living dwellings on a property. And so what folks were doing is they had their single family house street side, and then on the alley behind in the alley, they would build a 2-car garage with a full apartment above the garage, which they would then rent out. So that was your second,
interesting.
Your second living unit that you were able to rent out. It was, you know, and it was a great way to, you know, have additional housing available. And those were about, you know, depending, I mean, they were probably right around that 350, 400 square feet, you know, your 1 bedroom or studio style apartment. But I was thinking, I was in a hotel a couple years ago, and it was really well designed, where you had a bedroom plus your, you know, small kitchen and living room and, you know, fireplaces. It was out in Park City, Utah, and it was, you know, it was maybe 350 or 400 square feet, but it had some vaulted ceilings. But I remember, you know, being in there and looking around, going, man, I mean, I could live here. You know, it had everything. It even had washer and dryer in the unit, right? And so it was like, this has got everything, and it's only 350 square feet. Yeah, you could definitely live in a tiny home. They're livable, and if you design them right, I think they can be super comfortable too.
I think we should start a reality TV show, right? and then we're gonna put Jason and his entire family in a tiny home and see how long they can live in that thing before they start strangling each other. That would
Maybe
be.
a
I think
day.
that'd make a good series.
Maybe a day.
That would be a good series.
Family
Well,
of 6, one
here's
tiny
a,
home. How long do they make it?
One tiny home, one big problem.
Yeah, right.
From newhomesource.com, they put out an article here recently. 5 states perfect for tiny houses: California, Oregon, Florida, Texas, and Colorado were their top 5 for
Really?
states. And that's we're kind of seeing that, right? Like states are kind of adopting this idea of that being more. And then I came across another one, extraspace.com. They had their best U.S. cities for tiny homes. And number 4 was Minneapolis. You know, so I'm sure that was kind of to your point, Jason, a couple years ago. You know, they became a little bit more lax with these concepts. And I mean, I don't recall this. I mean, in fact, I'd have to ask maybe you, Jason, or mom and dad. But you know, mom and dad, you know, they had their first home just on the backside of grandma and grandpa's house.
Yep.
You know, so that concept of like, and that's kind of the stories that I remember hearing here in the last couple of years of you know, parents saying, hey, we have a nice 2-acre lot home and a nice home. We have plenty of space. We could bring in a tiny home and maybe, you know, let our young adult child live there for, you know, until they kind of get things going or financially more stable with their young career, whatever the reason may be. And some states, some cities are becoming more lax to that idea. You know, so that's kind of interesting. You see that, and then you talk about, you know, that there's actually some full blown developments where all the homes are tiny homes, and it's the whole development is developed with that concept. Yep. So I think that would be kind of interesting too. One kind of the reason that sparked the topic that I wanted to talk about today was that article that I was referencing by Joseph Coughlin on MarketWatch.com, and it's titled "The Next Big Real Estate Boom: Homes for People Living Alone." And he was kind of talking about like the data, you know, the data points. And I just grabbed a couple, you know, 3 talking points that he brought up, and you know, one was in 1940, only 7.7% of U.S. households were single person. By 2023, that figure rose to nearly 30%. So that's a massive jump, right? You go from, let's just call it 8% for, you know, simplicity, or I guess we'll leave it at 7.7, and that's got to be really close to almost exactly 4 times more. You know, so 4 times more households are, or fourfold, you know, are now owned by single person. And then just noting that cities like Washington, San Francisco, New York, living alone is quickly becoming the most common household type. So I thought that was interesting too. He also made the comment that this isn't just a U.S. thing. You know, in fact, maybe it's a more of a global thing. European countries like Sweden, Norway, Finland, Germany report more than 40% of households composed of a single person. Tokyo, Stockholm, Paris, nearly 50%. That's just a massive number, right? I mean, 50% of all the homes are owned by one person, you know, single living. And you know, he kind of finished it off with, you know, that our current developers here in the U.S., you know, they're overbuilding large homes and underbuilding small homes. And, you know, I kind of thought about that. And I think one piece that I didn't really see get covered in his article was the fact that we have seen a really great rise of townhouses. You know, not just townhouses that are for rentals, but townhouses for purchase. We didn't really have that market here in the Sioux Empire 20 years ago. I mean, yeah, there were some, but there wasn't like that entry-level townhouse that a single person could buy. My wife and I, we bought our first home. It was a townhouse. We bought it as purchased. You know, so we own our fourth of the. It was a structure that held 4 townhouses. We owned our townhouse, which was, you know, 1/4 of the structure. We owned 1/4 of the lot that the 4-unit structure sat on. So we owned the lot and we owned our structure, right? But it's one structure. You know, we owned our portion, and one of the reasons why it was so interesting to us was, it was just my wife and I, we were married and we didn't need a lot of square feet, and the townhouses satisfied that. We don't. It was just 3 bedrooms. Really, it was 2 bedrooms and a really small bedroom that we use as an office, and slab on grade, so there's no basement. Had an HOA, so we didn't really have to think about yard work or snow removal. And the best part about it, it was super cheap. I think we bought it for like $140. And you can't do that anymore. This is back in 2013 maybe. So that the townhouse for sale where you can own it and own the land that it sits on, that has been, in my opinion, a growing trend, especially in the Sioux Empire area. And Jason, I think, and Mike, you guys were ahead of, obviously you're 10 times larger of a metro than the Sioux Empire. So I'm sure that demand was needed, longer ago. But I feel like, that is something that is allowing people to get into a tiny home, still own it, and you can own it and afford it with a single income.
Yeah, I think one of the first tiny home developments that I was introduced to, Marcus, was from our cousin Kelly Walgrave. And this was about 10 years ago I believe it was in Mitchell, South Dakota. Her and her father, Don Walgrave, had introduced me to it. So I didn't go out there, but I saw the marketing material on it, and they were great. It was a whole development. All it was tiny homes. I remember it was selling very quickly. And it was, they're really nice. They were all 400 or 500 square feet tiny homes, all in a development. I think there was some water access for some of them, but and if you think about all the RV parks throughout the United States, I mean, these RV communities where folks will maybe they live up north in the summer and then down south in the winter, and they've got an RV park. Well, that's essentially what a tiny home development is.
Yes.
It's an RV, that's a permanent, it doesn't move. And I think it's only going to continue to grow. I mean, as the cost of housing, continues to increase, these are great options. Marcus, you're right. You got single individuals as you get older. I mean, you certainly don't need the 3,000 square foot house if it's just you. And the maintenance and all the things that come along with that. So I really like the idea and concept between tiny home developments and communities. I think they can serve a lot of folks and really take care of a lot of needs. And then I've seen stuff on, tiny home veteran communities, where they're building these communities for vets, so it's pretty cool.
We have that in Sioux Falls.
You do?
They broke ground a number of years ago. It's the Veterans Community Project, and I've been blessed to have the opportunity to volunteer to help build a couple of different of those homes, and I mean it's a phenomenal program. Speaking specifically of this one, Veterans Community Project, where and these are more or less like a studio apartment, right? But in its own home. So you go in, and they're nice. I mean, again, the studio size, so we're not having significant amount of square feet, but they're designed specifically for the needs of our veterans. And they have the studio concept where the living room, kitchen, bedroom space is more or less one space, and then a nice private bathroom, full bathroom. It's fully insulated, water, sewer provided by the city, all the power there, and then there's also in a sense like this specific one, the Veterans Community Project. It has like a community center in the middle of the development. Where then they bring in professionals, whether it's a professional real estate agent saying, hey, if anybody's looking to get into, a single family home outside of this community, this is what we have for you. Bringing in professional chefs to help, teach our veterans that are, in this community, how to prepare healthy meals, things of that nature. So it's a truly amazing project that's going on. But that idea, it's not. It can be used for everybody demographically, a wide range of people, whether it's, first time home buyers or to help veterans, or the other kind of interesting piece in this article was they talked about the aging demographically group of baby boomers that are getting old. And a lot of them, if you look statistically, baby boomers have the highest, divorce rate demographically that we have in the U.S. And so there's a large number of them that, might just be living a single life. But our retirement communities, it's kind of based on like the silent generation, right? Where great grandma and grandpa, or grandma and grandpa, they've been together the whole time. They're coming together. We need at least two, to satisfy two people's needs. Where maybe now that is potentially the business opportunity, to satisfy what the baby boomers are going to be wanting here in the near future.
Pretty cool.
Mike, do you see anything in the finance world in terms of restrictions? I mean, as long as it satisfies certain criteria, I mean, I'm sure you're probably good to go.
There's certainly restrictions on something like this. Anytime you get into a unique property type, you're going to have restrictions, right? So right now, tiny homes, I don't think you can get a standard conventional FHA or VA loan on a tiny home right now. Comps is a big thing, right? Is there a comp that has, that supports that small of a structure, things like that? So the appraisal part of it can get a little weird. What are utilities? Is it suited for year-round use? Is it a permanent structure? Is it on a permanent foundation? It's a lot of those types of questions that come up to be able to get financing on there. Now, banks will certainly finance these, right? So portfolio loans, and there's other types of financing that are out there for them. But it certainly is not as easy as, hey, this thing will just qualify for a standard conventional 5% down deal. Sometimes you might have to dig a little bit more.
I had a listing a number of years ago, and we actually made front page of the real estate section in the Star Tribune because we had the smallest home on the market. I think it was 490 square foot single family house.
Yeah.
So it was that's
a tiny home.
1940s, 1950s build. So tiny homes aren't new. I mean, this one, it was small, but I'll tell you what, the guy who ended up buying it, he came in and he renovated it and finished the basement. So then he was at, 900 square feet or 850 square feet. He sold it for $200,000, and so it was, which to Mike's point, there were no comps because there was nothing that small that had sold in many, many, many years. But it was on a regular lot and it was a tiny home.
Yeah.
If I were to predict, I think, and then this is kind of from what my research that I was doing here before today's show, was that, the states that are more favorable in terms of less extreme weather changes, seasons, right? We get down there and maybe we're just Texas where winter it's going to get to 60 and the summers, 110. And then they say we don't really, you're right,
million degrees.
Yeah, but I think you start seeing those type of states, right? And they're going to be able to maybe safely invest in these type of projects and see if they can take foot and really happen. And we did a show about a year ago about the using the 3D printers for homes. So, you looking at today's technology and you start blending that in with what maybe the new generation of home buyer demographically is made up of. And yeah, I think it wouldn't surprise me if you see down south, the states that allow for it, it's more feasible for the seasons to see more of these happening. I think we just have more limitations when you get up north and you got negative 40 degrees wind chill, some of those Arctic blasts that happen, and it can get pretty cold up here. So, guys, should we jump into the legal minute?
Legal minute.
Let's do it.
This is Jeff O'Brien, attorney with Hush Blackwell with the U.S. Home Talk Legal Minute. Have you ever wondered as to what legal rights lakeshore property owners have related to the lakeshore and the lake? Contrary to what you might believe, the state of Minnesota does not own a strip of land around all Minnesota lakes, and most of this land is private property. Riparian rights is the term the law uses to describe the property rights which arise from private ownership of shoreland. These rights apply to lakeshore property and include the rights to fish, boat, hunt, and swim on and in the lake. In addition, the riparian owner has the right to make use of the lake over its entire surface. With rights, however, come responsibilities, and Minnesota law specifies that it is the duty of riparian owners to exercise their rights reasonably and not to interfere with others' riparian rights. For instance, riparian owners cannot dike off and drain or fence off their part of the lake, and doing so is actually a misdemeanor. Riparian rights and water law generally involve complex legal issues. If you are an owner of lakeshore property and you have a question about what you can and cannot do with your shoreland, you should contact your attorney. This is Jeff O'Brien, attorney with Hush Blackwell with the U.S. Home Talk Legal Minute.
That's super interesting. It's a topic that has come up here in South Dakota. Meandering. I wasn't quite catching the term that Jeff was referencing. But we have, in our state, we were talking about meandering lakes, and that's that concept where, it's public land, right? If you can get onto the water from a public access, then you can use the lake. There were a number of ones that are non-meandering, but one of the reasons why it's a hot topic here in eastern, really northeastern South Dakota, is because they have historically high water levels. If you guys know anything about fishing, Devil's Lake is a well-known fishery, throughout the U.S. for trophy walleye and perch and pike fishing. Well, we have a similar glacier lake situation in the northeast South Dakota where 40 years ago it was farmland, and now this farmland is 30 feet underwater. And the people who own these farms, they're like, hey, nobody was allowed to come on my land 40 years ago. Now just because it's flooded, I got boaters and everybody shooting around. So there's been some issues with meandering and non-meandering lakes that we have. So that's a super interesting legal minute. So thank you, Jeff O'Brien. Appreciate that.
Good job, Jeff.
Huh, I never thought about putting a fence in the lake. Like he mentioned, like you can't run a fence and block stuff off. I'm like,
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's where like some of our lakes they deemed them non-meandering were I feel like I'm going to get this wrong, but where the public then cannot, and that's what they were doing. They were like, hey, the fishermen were like, well, I can get on it because this road's public and the ditch is flooded, so I'm just going to dump my boat from the road onto the lake, and I didn't touch your property. So then the farmers were coming up and they were running fence, from where the dry land was to the other dry land, and they were constructing, and they're like, yeah, well, this is my land and my fence is on my land, so good luck getting past my fence. So,
Gotcha.
It was an interesting, right? So it was an interesting little deal that was going on. But yeah, obviously, get in contact with your attorney if you have any questions about that. All right, guys. Well, great show today. As always, as our show comes to an end, we want to thank you all for taking the time to listen to us live and for your support of U.S. Home Talk. You guys can always find our podcast, today's show, or our past shows on our website, ushometalk.com, or wherever you guys find your podcast. This is Marcus Walgrave, Jason Walgrave, Mike Overson. We hope you have yourself a blessed week.